The room hold in at their new location?
120 people. Okay. We come to the last phase of the quarter of civilization. And in fact, the next two classes that close this semester are going to be integrative exercises at looking at each of the quarters that we've looked at. We've looked at the first two quarters, that is, we'll close with this. And we'll see how all of these God forces integrate together, which is interesting. And obviously next semester we'll go on with the quarter of duality and the quarter of mutation. But aside from that, let's get down to the business of phase number 12, because I think in so many ways it is emblematic of a number of basic principles that civilization is something that is dependent on the yin, that it is the yin that has to establish it, and that the very forces that bind civilization are forces that are inherent, in that sense, in the yin. And here we come to, I think, one of the most exalted of goddesses that exist in just about any culture you can find. The name is regularly mispronounced. It's taken Egyptologists a long time to figure out the nature of the ancient dialect and how it was actually spoken. Excuse me. It's so difficult to pronounce that it makes me cough. Anyway, it's more, the sound is actually more like muhat than it is mat. And, most people that are addicted to Aleister Crowley tarot cards consistently call her Mat. And that's really not her name. But anyway, Muat. It's even hard to codify what she is really about. That is, she's more than just a goddess. And in the goddess tradition, she was the wife of Thoth. She is the goddess of truth, of justice, of law, of morality. She is the binding force of tradition. And perhaps one of the most powerful aspects of her nature is that she binds civilization by binding it to its tradition. She is against change. She's for the establishment of absolutes, and absolutes must be rooted in fact. And if there's any place where fact is both essential and illusionary, it is here in this face of Muat. But she's more than that. In fact, she represents a universal, almost cosmic principle to the Egyptians, that everyone acted in the name of her, that in essence she was the binding force of civilization, just as she is here in that sense in the close of the quarter of civilization. Here we get to the binding force. And I think binding is a really good word because, it means being tied, in a sense, being tied up, to bound someone, to bind them up, to tie them up, to lock them in. And here is the lock into tradition. And of course, this lock into tradition, it is both the bedrock of civilization, but it's also a prison. I mean, it's also a prison. I guess that's why the law, in that sense, is also so deeply associated with her. As a matter of fact, when the ancient Egyptians, when they died, and of course she's very much the essence of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, when they died, there was this process in which hearts were measured or weighed for their rightness or wrongness. Not so much evil and good as in the Christian tradition or Mediterranean tradition. This was very different, actually. It was about the pure heart and the heart that wasn't pure. Now, obviously, the framework for establishing that is kind of, what to do. But anyway, this was, part of their mythology, that the heart was weighed for its pureness or not. And those hearts that were unpure, they went to a certain place. And those hearts that were pure obviously went on to another. I think they went off with Osiris or something. But all of that was done according to the measurement being based on the law, the morality, the continuity, the civilization, the tradition established by Mu'at. In other words, not only did she govern the life itself, but in fact she remained powerful even in the afterlife. In other words, here is the bedrock of the essential truth of a civilization. Okay, so let's take a look at this this delightful mix that we have today. I confess that I'm an illustration junkie. I have my best experiences as a teacher preparing, because I don't prepare in any normal way. I don't research things or make notes or all this kind of stuff. But my preparation is preparing the illustration. And for me, the more complex the illustrations, the more fascinating the process, because as I'm putting it together, obviously my mind is exploring what is happening and watching. And these illustrations for me are, they're magical, because there is so many different kinds of information that can be synthesized together. And obviously here in the 12th face that we're dealing with something that is very, very interesting. That is, first of all, we are dealing with two doubles in that sense. We have the Tyrosin, which is the 31 and the 62, and we have the Terminators. And we have, the 33 Terminator, the 56 Terminator, and as you'll remember from Parvati, previously we had a Terminator, the 12th Terminator, and of course as being part of that codon structure, obviously, it is here, it is a continuity, if you will, between the way in which Parvati operates and the way in which Mu'at operates. But let's begin with the Terminators, because Terminators are, with the exception of Arnold Schwarzenegger, obviously, Terminators are something that are really fascinating. The genetic code is an alphabet. It's an alphabet. And it's probably one of the easiest ways of understanding that. That is, it's all written out in a code. And what we're looking at here is components of that code. We can see, for example, that one of the aspects of the alphabet is the so-called terminator. Well, terminator is in fact punctuation, and you'll notice in the boxes where we have the three terminators that beside each is actually a punctuation mark, and you can see them: the 56 exclamation, the 33 period, and the 12 the question mark. In other words, what we're looking at is that, all of you know that according to human design, that the solar cycle, the new solar cycle each year begins when the sun enters into the 41st gate. And the 41st gate happens to be the only initiating codon. And basically what that means is that the 41st gate is the capital on the first letter at the beginning of the sentence. It starts every sentence. But at the end, you have three variations to that original one, if you will. In other words, that source That beginning, that common beginning, but we have three different ways in which ultimately that sentence can express itself. And remember that terminators have another name. They're called stop codons. Stop. And that's very important because when you look at these three gates, these gates have built-in brakes. Brakes like in a car. They are stop codons. And that stop is very important because, as you know, it would be very, very difficult to read any kind of text unless there was punctuation. It would get very confusing because you really wouldn't know how or why, the way, all of that stuff. Punctuation is an essential thing for us. And what punctuation really says is that this statement is finished. In other words, this is a close to that expression. There is no more to be added to it. It is a complete component within itself. Now understand something about this face. We're talking about, it's not even talking about a goddess. It's literally talking about a force. We're talking about a force that instills in the form principle the demands for morality, law, truth. Now, one of the things that's so interesting about this codon is that it is a deeply, deeply, deeply collective codon. It's what I call a Solomon's world codon. That is, you've got the 33, so you have the abstract along with the 56 abstract. You've got the 31 logic with the 62 logic. You've got Solomon's world, nothing new under the sun. Right? That's why the 12 is on the outside, because it carries the mutative force. It's different. And of course you can see the terminators. The terminators are either logic, abstract, or individual. There is no such thing as a tribal terminator. We know that about the tribe, running on and on and on. But anyway, if we look at these punctuation points, we have to begin to grasp something about the nature of truth. Because if we want to understand truth in this context, we can't look at the terminators. We can't. We have to look at the tyrosin. It's the tyrosin that is so fascinating. You see, this codon, this binary codon, this is what it's all about. Really. This is what civilization is built on. Civilization is built on the influence of facts. The influence and influencing of others through facts. The influencing of the way one moves to the future through facts. And these facts exist outside of mutation. In other words, once the fact is established, Osiris will weigh your heart, then the fact becomes carved into stone. It becomes permanent. It never changes. It never changes. See, fact and truth are relative things. They're relative. But of course, they have great influence, despite the fact that they're relative or subjective. This is the power that is here. This power to control and influence through facts, not just facts. The 62nd gate is the gate of the Maya. It is the very instrument of creating the Maya. It gives concretized names to things. It is this very naming of things that gives the Maya its density. And what is not named does not exist in the illusion. So that what is placed in the law can become deeply prejudicial. It can be very slanted. Because here the Maya is controlled. Morality, the law, These are forces that control humanity. And humanity is controlled through the manipulation of fact. Because it does not mean that this fact is in essence a truth. It doesn't. And the goddess knows that. In the end, it's not about the truth, it's about the law, it's about the continuity, it's about the building of the civilization, it's about maintaining the civilization, and the civilization cannot be maintained without laws, without control. How powerful. And the terminators? What did these terminators really express with their punctuation marks? Let's think about the 56. The 56th gate is a gate of the cross of the laws. The law is built in here. And this is a gate of surprise. Surprise. It's what the exclamation mark is all about. There's a great joke about the channel 1156. It's a great joke. It's the channel of the seeker. That's what it says. It doesn't say it's the channel of the finder. As a matter of fact, seekers do not find. You know? I mean, seekers can be found. That's something else. So to have an exclamation mark here says something about the whole pathway of seeking. You see, Muhat was not in favor of seeking. Not in favor of it at all. What happens when each member of the tribe begins to seek? They begin to question. They begin to say, is this really possible? Can it really work this way? They begin to challenge tradition. They no longer give up 4 months of their life to build these ridiculous monuments. They rebel. They don't want to pay the taxes. They don't want to be enslaved, and on and on and on and on and on. Oh, it leads to real trouble. And the priests and priestesses of the gods and goddesses, man, they can be out of work. No, we don't want that. It's a stop. It's a stop. There's nothing to be found. There's nothing to be found. Think about how powerful that is. I mean, think about all the human beings on this planet that are in the thrall of, one extreme of one religion or another. There is no question for them that there is nothing to seek. There is no question. The deeper you see beings bound to their tradition, whatever it may be, the more closed these beings are. We all know that. They don't want to hear about the other this or that this is possible and that's possible and this and that. Oh no. Oh no. And what is the 56th gate? Look, the 56th gate and the 62nd gate, they're really, really, really special gates. They're metamorphic. They translate concepts into language. The 62nd gate takes the concept of a fact. But it is the 62nd gate that brings it to life. That can express it in detail. Verbalize it. And the 56th gate? Its gift, its metamorphic gift, is to translate ideas, concepts into stories. Stories. See, the 62nd gate is a fact speaker, a detail speaker. And the 56th gate is a storyteller. And what do we want from our storyteller? If we're Mu'at, we want our storyteller to tell the same stories over and over and over and over and over again. What do we call that? We call it the oral tradition. Where do you think all of our biblical, all of our holy book stuff, where do you think it comes from? Right here. You get the story, and then you tell the story over and over and over again, and you're seeking nothing. You're not looking for another God. Thou shalt have no other God before me, you know? It's a real lock. It's a real lock. And then the 56 just gets stuck. It gets stuck in telling those same old stories. Where do you think our morality tales come from? Same old stories. Over and over and over and over again. You see, here, in this power of Mu'at, you see what the abstract is really about. The past. Here it's locked into the past. It's not allowed to tamper with the 3162 future that's going to be manipulated, controlled. I mean, the advent of the nine-centered being in 1781, it really changed the world, obviously. But if you look back before that, one of the things that you really notice the most is how slowly civilizations aged. I mean, you know, the Romans could have a 1,000-year empire because everything was moving so slow because they were locked into this principle, locked in. Not able to get out of it. Same old stories. Same manipulated truth. Same law. I mean, that 1,000 years, you know, at least for 500 of those years, there was one law across an enormous expanse. Everybody locked in. See, this is what civilization is. It's a locking force. Remember, we're dealing with the yin. Look at that you at the bottom, you know? All those yin-yins. This is the foundation. We're closing here with the ultimate power of the civilizing program. But we haven't met all the yang yet. You know, we haven't met all the forces that are going to be the mirrors of these. But here you have to see from the point of view of the form principle. You know, it is all about holding on to the past. Holding on to the past, not letting the abstract loose in trying to determine the future. Locked in. The seeker that can't find. And then we have the 33. And you can see that period. Whoa, is that a period? Bang! That's a full stop, you know? No ifs, no ands, no buts, no comment. Just end. Think about the human experiential way. It's an abstract process. It actually begins with the initiating codon, methionine 41. And in essence, it closes with the 33rd gate. And this close with the 33rd gate is this, gate of retreat. So it is one of the gates of aloneness. And as one of the gates of aloneness, it is also a full stop codon. Now what does retreat do? It basically is a remembrance. It's about remembering. And it is about remembering, not about remembering for the benefit of the future, but simply remembering. It is the prodigal, after all, the channel 3313. That being that goes out into the world, collects their experience and comes back and shares them. And you see, civilization is a lock. It's a lock. It locks us in. It closes the door on experience. It doesn't allow experience to continue its process, to learn from its experience and seek something else. No, it stops it there. Oh, there is this quality of revelation that is a potential of the 33rd gate. But more often than not, in the context of the work of Mu'at, the revelation is just a way of maintaining the storytelling of the 56. See, civilization is only interested in control mechanisms. It's about control mechanisms. And remember, you cannot take this out of context. We are talking about the influence of personality crystals on the mind through this particular chemistry. We're talking about the influence on the mind in the way in which the mind deals with the possibilities of law and morality and the rest. It's the way the mind is conditioned to look at civilization. And it is only one of 16 influences that are there. So again, don't take any of these things out of context. However, one cannot ignore something about the terminator stop codons being here in this face, that is the majority of them. This is a punctuation point for the whole process. You cannot build a successful, viable program without this civilizing process. You can't. And just as this is so truly logic and abstract in its balance, it's also there to understand how deeply dualistic it is. There's them and us that is born out of this. There is this enormous pressure to maintain the infrastructure, because it's only with the infrastructure controlled. And what are we controlling? We're controlling human minds. This is what this is all about. Controlling the way the minds will work. Controlling the way in which the personalities will feel about things. Built into all of us, whether we have the gates or not, because we have the receptors. If we don't have the gates, we're all influenced by this. There is a part of us that is conservative. I know that myself. I don't want anybody messing around with human design who shouldn't be. That's Mu'at rising up in me. Do you know what I mean? This is, Everything is built this way in our civilization. Everything. You see how difficult it is for companies, that build success on a certain this or that, and eventually it fades. How difficult it is for them to change their culture, change their direction, change all of those things. Because it's the Muhat force that's at work. How difficult it is for, so many parts of the world to break out of their, primitive, locked-in process. Holding on so deeply, blindly, it seems to us, to tradition. But you can see they're helpless in that. And you see, it's not just a matter of holding on to the past. Remember that the 3162 presents a promise of the future. Only when we're organized this way as a civilization, only when we continue to obey our gods, only when we continue to follow the power of our leaders, only then are we going to be able to go into the future successful. It's the pitch. The pitch is not revolution. We'll get there. It's not. The pitch is stability. Stability. Civilization must be stable. Can't have people running around with all kinds of silly ideas. This is the way things work. This is the way things always will work, and let me prove it to you. I will give you the facts. Oh, tyrosine is really something. This manipulation of the collective, influencing the collective through facts. And think about something when because the tendency is to immediately apply that to the leader. After all, the 31.7, the channel of leadership, blah, blah, blah. But the thing to recognize about the 31.7 is that this is a projected channel, as all of the channels are, that are possibilities out of this space. They all need support. They all need recognition. Otherwise, they don't work. It's something to understand the limitation of Muat's power, because that's the limitation. It's why there's so much effort made by civilizations to get their, citizens to constantly identify with, what that is. It's why nationalism has a pseudo-religious quality to it. Our nation, our way, our motherland, our fatherland, our this, our that, blah, blah, blah. And all of these societies, on festival days, dressing up as they did 300, 400, 500, whatever years ago, in order to maintain the illusion of the continuity of the civilization. Same God, same story, same ceremony, same festivals, same religion, boom, 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 here it is. Measured out in the form principle. Structured in such a way that, the average human being is locked in. These are the facts. These are our leaders, and this is, them expressing the facts to us. They're going to guide us into the future. And we have our glorious past to maintain. We keep telling the story. We keep sharing the experiences. We identify with our culture. It's a great homogenizing agent, obviously. And when I say that, I don't, there is no intent on my part to be negative in that expression. Obviously, this is part of the program and part of the way that we build, the illusion that we live in, and how important this is from the mental point of view, how influenced the not-self is. Again, remember that, this is part of the influence, on the not-self personality of humanity. And that you can see it's very successful. You see, because it's hard to get beyond the 56. It's hard to get beyond the 33. It's hard to get beyond the 12. It's hard. You have to be pulled from the other side. There has to be other forces at work in order to change anything. You cannot stop, lock, imprison the abstract process. You can't amputate it. I mean, that's what this does. It locks it all in. Put stop codons on the 56 so it can't easily deal with ideas, isn't necessarily even allowed to grasp them. And that the 33, that the experience isn't worthy in the end of revelation. What is the value of retelling the experience if it doesn't lead to something else? How boring it is to tell the same stories over and over again, to reaffirm the same stories with the same experiences, locked into the same process. What was it like for you? All right. It's such a lock. Excuse me. Sorry for that, folks. You can see so clearly. I mean, that's, it is the thing that what this is doing. I mean, the human experiential way, the whole process, that's the whole abstract process. It is the only way for us to move forward. It is the way we were designed. That is that the balance that is there in the body graph, the balance between the logical side and the emotional side. The logical side just identifies. I mean, it just identifies. If you're identified in a fact, you're just going to accept it. You're not going to question it. If the pattern appears to work, then you simply accept it. The priest says that, he's going to pray to this God and it's going to rain, and it rains, and it's like, okay, this works. All right, I can be identified with that, period. But the experiential being is the only one that can truly challenge the false pattern. And just because you can create the illusion of pattern doesn't mean that it's legitimate, doesn't mean that it's truth, doesn't mean that it will always work, doesn't mean it's going to work the way it says it's going to work. Like every product that you buy, where they tell you that it's guaranteed to do this, that, and the other, and you discover, well, yeah. And you see, if there is no experiential expansion, then there is no challenge to that. There isn't. You see, experience is not intended to be shut off from ideas. It's not intended to be shut off from revelation. But those are the kinds of things that go against the civilizing process. They do. Yeah, it rained 12 years ago when the priest said that, but it hasn't rained in the last 7 years, and we keep praying to this God. Don't you think that there's something wrong here? Excuse me? See, that's not allowed. Mu'at does not want any challenges to the law. And in order to make that even more powerful, she carries, like the Venusian theme, this deep theme of the mores, the morality. It is a sin to question God. Don't do that. I mean, the abstract may be chaotic, but it is not to be denied. But here is the part of us mentally where we are influenced literally to control it. And in very, very significant places, this 3356. And the only places where there are stop codons, the majority, the collective ones. I like this relationship between the 12 and the 56. You have a reversal here of the G and the A. So you've got a UGA here, and here you've got a UAG. And you can see that the yang goes from the middle to the top, and the yin-yang goes from the top to the middle. It's an interesting relationship between the two of them. One worth pondering. The question mark. And it's something that is interesting because, of course, one of the things that I commented on was the fact that the 33, 31, 56, 62, that their harmonic possibilities do not point them at a motor, that is, their projected elements. When you're looking at the 12th gate, obviously you are pointed at a very, very powerful motor, that is, the solar plex system and the emotional wave. The 12th gate is, by its very question mark, is a gate of caution, and is known as a gate of caution. And you can see that individuality, the Parvati theme, which of course is also not one that's working to the advantage in that sense of womankind, but the Parvati theme, the Parvati terminator is the only one that has this question, really? Really? You really want me to believe that? I don't know. And of course, there's no room in Muhat for this, I don't know. Maybe this isn't working. Maybe this isn't right. Don't you see it? You see it in our world, this slavish following of leaders, And it doesn't matter who they are, because it works in a binary. You take somebody like George Bush, who's got, 30% favorable reading in the polls at home. There are those people that are still deeply identified with, not wanting to change the conservative tradition that's being established in the conservative way, and let's not bring in any new ideas, let's keep on trucking along. And then you've got the other side that's deeply against it. And you can see that this is one of the most dynamic themes, is that if civilization alone were so controlled as it is here, because here you really see propaganda, it's so controlled that there would not be, in fact, true growth. And yet if it weren't controlled, we would have chaos. It's the morality, after all. You see, one of the advantages of controlling the collective is that you control its behavior. Its behavior. This is a program that's been running through the entire history of our species. It goes back to its glory of the influence it had over the seven-centered being. There is this dynamic tension between, building and maintaining the civilization and forces that are ready to tear it down. If we go back historically, we see that the forces that were there to tear it down were always from the outside. In other words, the Romans dealing with the barbarian hordes, this kind of thing. What we get to see when we move to the transition to the nine-centered being is that we get to see this challenge from the inside. In other words, that from the beginning of 1781, we're already in the beginnings of the Age of Revolution, and you have this movement in which vast citizenry within countries are beginning to rebel, are beginning to turn against the tradition and the civilization that they're actually a part of. You get to see that full blown when we went through the era of, fascist revolutions, communist revolutions, all of these various upturnings and all of them, by the way, claiming some older tradition. Trying to root themselves into creating a mythology of history. It's so funny to watch even those forces when they turn against, Muat. They still honor her because, of course, we can't escape any of this. It's in us. It's in our chemistry. It's a very part of us. It's part of everyone. It's what I find so fascinating about, the vast diversity and yet at the same time the amazing control of the program over humanity. And that the diversity itself is very much illusionary, in that they're all programmed with the same chemistry, their minds are all programmed with the same influences, and they're all operating as not self through very basic structural patterns. It is extraordinary to see the way all of this, meshes together and how it's expressed. And that you can see that unless you can break away from the mind, you cannot break away from the control. Let's say you're somebody that has the 56th gate. As long as you're in the thrall of the mind, because that 56 has a stop to it, it's what makes that whole channel so dissatisfying as a life process. There is no finding. It's the punishment. It's the punishment of going beyond the 56, if you know what I mean. It's really something to understand the influences that are there, how they're locked in us chemically, deeply locked in us. And you see what this really eliminates? It eliminates courage. There's no courage here. It's not so much that there's cowardice here. There's just no courage. There is compliance. There is obedience. But there's no courage. There's nothing here that sticks its finger in the air and says, I've had enough of this. None. There is none of this extraordinary wonder of, awakening and challenge. No. Control, control, control. And you see, at this time, with the fading of the cross of planning, the glue that has held together the civilizations of the last 400 years, these themes are really going to take a beating. It's why we have the fundamentalism that we do. Please understand, this is a Mu'at principle if there ever was one. The harsh moralities, the harsh justice, the rigid laws, the denial of seeking. This is fundamentalism. And it is, these powers never go away. You cannot overcome this by simply being a human being, lost in the program. This is the mind field. This is where we are all controlled and influenced at the mental level. These profound influences. And when you begin to see things like you happen to have the 56 in an open throat, you begin to think about what that kind of influence is on your mind, your not-self mind. How powerful that becomes, there is only one way out. You break the covenant with these gods and goddesses. You deny them the right to control you. You can still watch them. You cannot escape them. Every aspect that I have discussed so far, these 2 quarters that we have gone through, these 8 faces that we have shared together, I know them all, so do you. We all have bits and pieces of it. In a different mathematical configuration, some have this and that, others only have this and the other, and we have different receptors, but we all know all this. And you see, the thing that impresses me about these Godheads is that they can have huge influence. See, this face can have a lot more influence than many others because it ends things. These 2 stop codons. They're very powerful. They're very powerful. It's hard to get past them. It's the end of a complete message. And it's a totally different story to start beyond that. I mean, it's chemistry after all. All of us locked in Muhat's embrace. And of course, the worst is the morality. Because morality is the deep controller. It's the morality that operates through the interactions between human beings in a community. What is considered correct, what isn't considered correct. The morality about the way in which the sexes will deal with each other, the way in which life will work. The underlying themes that are the embodiment of ultimately what becomes law. Here is a control of our relationships. I mean, we are still doing the same, basic bonding systems between men and women that we have been doing for thousands of years. The code, the moral code of human interaction has been locked in for a very, very, very long time. And to break with moral code, you know how quickly you get into trouble. Oh man, do you get into trouble. I mean, even in this day and age in which there is a so-called liberalism on the planet that, mostly just deals in pornography, the fact is that despite all of that, the reality is that we remain as moralistic as we have ever been. It's here. You see, there's certain things we won't challenge. There's certain things the not-self will not challenge. It just won't. The most difficult thing to challenge in the world still today is God. I mean, to challenge religion. Oh yeah, there are atheists, and yes, there are those that do these things. Out of 7 billion people on the planet, there is a infinitesimal amount that really reject God, spirituality. I mean, people don't challenge this. They don't. It's here. It's Muhat. How dare you challenge me? You of unpure heart, I will send you to your hell, I tell you. You will not challenge me. I don't know if it's apocryphal. It's the late George Bernard Shaw on his deathbed. He was a well-known atheist. He converted to Catholicism on his deathbed, and according to some traditions, he said, I'm not taking any chances. Muhat. This is this power. It's a kind of censorship. It's better that they don't know. That kind of censorship. It's better for them that they don't know. It's better that they don't think about things. It's better that they just do things the way they've always been done. It's a lot easier. Everybody knows what to do. Everybody knows what to expect. Everything's fine. This is her work. Isn't it interesting? In Parvati and here in Muhat, that we have these incredibly powerful yin forces that in one case don't benefit women, and in another case don't benefit individuality at all. They're very restrictive. I mean, it's part of the form principle. It's why it's so important to accept the fact that the only way you can operate correctly is through your inner truth. Because the form principle is rigid. It is, and it's very limiting. And if you don't operate within the limitation, you're never going to get its transcendence. One has to obey the form. And here, on this influence of us mentally, this trying to establish this mental rigidity. Mental rigidity. Locking the mind in to a certain set and not allowing it to move from there. Again, those stop points. Difficult to get beyond them. Really, very. So you can see the way in which the gods and the goddesses do their work. It's insidious. It's deep inside of us. It's in our chemistry. It's in every cell. It's in every moment of our existence. And you see that kind of invasive control. Hey, you cannot, with a not-self mind, stand before the face of these gods and challenge them. They will just mock you. But the moment that you become an apostate, the moment that you turn your back on what you once thought was real, and the moment that you turn away from your own mind as your source of power, because it is not, that's the moment that you really can find the beauty of this, and not its unesthetic side. I don't mind seeing this pass through my mind. It is, after all, what's there. But it does not in any way influence the decisions that I make. The only thing it can possibly influence is just the way that I see, because it's my frame of reference. I see what these things do. I watch it in myself. I watch it in others. And in that way I have my personal relationship with the Godhead. It's something that human design has given me. My personal relationship with the planets, because I feel them in my body. I feel them as they transit and transform my design. And here, in the deepest sense, to feel them in my very chemistry. To feel this force within me and know, because I know it's something that's real, I can feel Muat in my body. I can feel this influence in the mind. It's there. And I see it all around me. And she is, in that sense, very much alive. Quite a force. Okay. As always, pleasure to share this with you. I do enjoy my dance through the Godhead. And anyway, to all of you, you have yourself a great day and a nice week. And till next time. Bye for now.